Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. I'm Abram Kielsmeyer-Jones. This is InfoPane to launch your studies. We're going to spend the next hour on how to most efficiently and effectively use the InfoPane in Accordance. I will talk about how to set it up, how to customize it, and then how you can use it as a launch pad for your studies. It is meant to curate a lot of your resources, give them to you all in one place so that you can get in and out of them. The actual mechanics of getting into your resources are simplified so that you can focus on the research and the reading itself. There is a handout available to you. It is in the GoToWebinar control panel. It's what I'm showing on my screen. If you go to the handout section, just make sure that triangle is pointed down and you'll get the PDF that way. If you are watching this on a recording, because we are recording this session, you can email me for the handout, abramkj@accordancebible.com. And for anyone here live, you will also get a handout in your email later on today or tomorrow at the latest, as well as a link to the recording if you want to go back and re-watch. If you have questions or comments, I welcome them. The way that we do that is through the questions box. It's a one-way typed chat that comes from you to me, and I can either respond to you privately or publicly. I'll anonymize the comments and share them and then respond to everyone if that makes sense. Let me know in the meantime if you've got questions about any logistics and we will begin. The first thing to do is answer the question, what is the InfoPane? I explain it as context-specific access to your Accordance library for a single verse of text. I suppose we could add a single verse of biblical text. And that's important because it really is just verse by verse. We're going to open up a search tab, a Bible text, in just a moment, but do notice one thing, it's context specific, so you have to have a Bible text open to open the info pane. I've got a blank workspace here, as you can see. My toolbar is showing here. Info pane is in the toolbar. That's one of the ways to access it. If I click on info pane, it won't work. It will say the info pane can only be added to a search tab. So when I say context specific access for a single verse of text, it doesn't even work on its own because it doesn't know what verse you want. So we open up a search tab or a new tab. You can go to your toolbar here and open up a new tab this way. You could also go to library and open up a tab with the search text. You could also go to File, New Workspace, and have it open to your default search text that way. So multiple ways to get into the same setup. But once you have a Bible text open, now you can open the info pane. So now clicking on info pane will work because I have a biblical text open. And it will open to the verse that I already have showing in my search tab. So for example, if I had gone to John 3:16, let me close this info pane and show you. And if I click info pane from here, the info pane is keyed to John 3:16. And so what's showing here is different, of course, from what's showing in Genesis 1:1. So I mentioned that, and I don't want to over explain that, but just to say that it is just a single verse of text that's showing here. And so you are going to see a change in the resources that show even as you advance through an individual passage. We'll walk through these categories in a moment, but notice I'm just going to scroll here through the text on my trackpad, and I'm going to scroll through John 3, and notice at right, I'm just slowly scrolling the text. Notice how the info pane is changing. You might even just keep your eye right here for a moment. Info for John 3:24, 5, 6, 7, and different resources show for every verse. Now, what that does not mean is that somehow it's not pulling up all my grammars. You know, I had 5 or 6 grammars a few verses ago, now I only have 2. It just means that I only have 2 grammars where John 3:31 in this instance is listed as a reference. So that's what I mean when I say it's context specific. If you've got a verse reference in one of your resources, and again, we'll talk through these categories, it will show up in the info pane. If a particular resource you have installed in your library isn't showing up, that just means it doesn't have that verse reference there. So it's a trustworthy method, and it saves you the time. The manual way to do this, and of course you can do this, would be to open up all of your grammars and do a reference search for John 4:4, open up all of your commentaries. You could either do a search or open up parallel commentaries. You can still do all that, but the info pane basically runs a search for John 4:4 in all of your resources and puts them in parallel with you with your search text or the text that you're reading. And it will follow you as you scroll. It will follow you as you search. So if I go back to Genesis, let's say Genesis 1:3, it jumps right there. And of course, here we've got a pretty different set of commentaries. Those are my Genesis commentaries, or a 1-volume commentary that includes Genesis 1:3. That's going to look different if I move to a New Testament book, for example. So that's what the info pane is. It is context-specific access to your library for a single verse of text. There are some settings you can adjust in the gear icon, and that's right here. If you go to Set Info Pane Options, there are a few things that you can change here. These are just to do with personal preference. I like having the book covers showing, but you may want to maximize your screen real estate. Personally, I like the visual. I still love print books, and so any visual reminder of a book is good for me. But if you wanted to uncheck that, you could, and then it would look like this. You would just have a list in your info pane. That's one of the settings. You can also select the size, and so if you want to fit more stuff, I mean, this will be hard to see here, but there are very small book covers showing there, for example, very small cross references here. Go back and change that. Maybe you wanted it medium or medium large, and then you can also change the hypertext. The hypertext is what text shows in any verses that are hyperlinked here. And so here I've got in cross references 2 Corinthians 4:6. So a cross reference to Genesis 1:3, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light, is 2 Corinthians 4:6. So I'll hover over that, and in the instant details, it shows me that verse. God said, "Let light shine out of darkness," in the NRSV, because that was one of my settings, Set Info Pane Options, NRSV. Now, I'm in the NET text for my search tab. If I wanted to align those, I could change that, and now I'll see it in the NET text. If I wanted to see it in Greek, I could change it to the NA28 or a full Greek Bible or something like that. So you could take some time setting your info pane options here. I think probably the most important thing is some of these size settings. That's going to depend on whether you use an external monitor, as many of our users do, or how big your screen is. I've got a smaller screen. It's 13 some odd inches, so there's not a whole lot there. So I don't have enormous sizing here. But you can also set initial commentaries. How many commentaries will initially show? And we'll go through these categories in detail soon, but you can always adjust that here, show more, show less, but that setting will change how many initial commentaries show in your info pane. Maybe you just want to see 5 at a time. And so if I rerun that search, you'll see, well, maybe I need to close it and open it again. Yeah, now it's just showing 5 commentaries at a time. But that's another info pane option that you can set. All right, let me just pause there. This is all pretty introductory. What is the info pane? What are some of the settings you might think about? We're going to get into the individual categories now and even talk about how to rearrange them. That's not in the settings. That just happens kind of visually at the surface here. But let me pause and check and see if you've got questions or comments. Somebody says InfoPane works with texts, not just biblical text, for example, Josephus text. So if it is a primary text, it's going to look pretty different. But here we go. Not as much, of course. I've just got Josephus notes in this instance, but there may be more that shows eventually. And if an InfoPane doesn't work, it won't work. I mean, that, you know, as I did before, I need to have a text open, and maybe you try to access it from a commentary or something. It will tell you if it can't open. Thanks for that clarification. We'll continue on. Let me know what other questions or comments you have as we go. Let's talk about these categories. I'm going to stay here for now in Genesis 1. I'm going to go back to InfoPane. By the way, a few ways to open the InfoPane. This is not in the handout, but if you've got your toolbar showing, you can click this. You can just toggle it on and off. Keep it open when you want it, close it when you don't. You can also go to Add Parallel InfoPane. Whereas this button toggles it on and off, you could open multiple InfoPanes if you wanted to, and eventually it will give you a message that you can't fit anymore here. I think I will get to that. Oh, it's taking a minute. There we go. All right, now it can't add a new InfoPane, but I've got InfoPanes all over the place. I suppose there could be a use case where you've got multiple InfoPanes. I only use one at a time, but if you want multiple InfoPanes, this one just toggles one open and close, this eye icon here in the toolbar, but you can get to it from Add Parallel. There's also in the well, I guess there's not a way to add it up here in the help menu, but those are two ways to get to it. There's a setting that I did not know about for quite a while when using the InfoPane, and I just want to share this with you. This is not in the handout, but you can tell Accordance to always open an InfoPane with your search tab or not. So if this is selected, and this may be the default, it took me a while to figure out how to turn this off, and I've heard the same from other users. If this is selected, Add InfoPane, whenever you open up a biblical text, it opens it up with an InfoPane. So that's not just opening the text. All I'm doing is clicking on the biblical text, but it's opening it up with an InfoPane. Now that may be good. It may be that every time you open a biblical text, you always want that InfoPane there. You can close it. But if you're not using it, if more often than not, you just want to open the biblical text and don't want to go through closing it all the time, know that it's in your settings or preferences. It's under search tabs. And in Accordance, the search tab is your default, you know, whatever primary text you're opening when you open a new workspace. And it's this checkbox right here. If you can't remember where it is, that's okay, because your preferences are searchable. So if you were up here in your preferences, and this is what I did a moment ago, just type InfoPane and go to Add InfoPane, and you can uncheck that. So now when I open up my Bible text, it opens by itself. But of course I can add an InfoPane very easily. All right, let's talk about the categories in the InfoPane. You can rearrange them, and you may already be wondering why your InfoPane looks different from mine if it does. First of all, know that all of these triangles, they're called disclosure triangles, can expand and collapse. So I'm not really seeing much of anything here right now, and that may be fine. In fact, I use this as a way to kind of organize what's here. If everything is open and I'm scrolling through biblical text, and this may just be purely psychological, but this looks and feels like an awful lot to work through for one verse. So I may have these triangles clicked, which will hide what's there, but it will still give me my list. So what I might do is say, all right, I'm in Genesis 1:4. Let's start with my study Bibles. So now I can click that triangle and it will show my study Bibles. Maybe I'll work through them, and we'll talk about how to do that in a minute. And then I close that, or not close it, but I collapse it, expand it, and I may do that category by category. Maybe it doesn't bother you to have all the triangles expanded, but Accordance doesn't care. It just gives you the choice. You can do how you want to do it. You might spend some time thinking about these different categories. In what order do I want to see these categories? And notice too, by the way, there will be times as here where the categories themselves will change, not just what's in the categories, we would expect that, but the categories themselves. So here, Genesis 1:10, I'm not seeing any cross references. That category is gone. But remembering that the info pane is context specific access to single verses of text, that just means whatever cross-reference tool is showing in my info pane, we'll talk about that too, it doesn't have Genesis 1:10. Now, when I get to Genesis 1:11, that does have cross-references, so that will show there. So that's why you get this as I just scroll through the text quickly. The categories vary from verse to verse. That's as it should be. But we can change what's showing first here. Maybe what you always want to see first is your study Bibles. And that's often where I will start, is with study Bibles. I've got grammars here, which is how I tend to approach original language work. But to change the category order, just click the category, hold it. So I'm clicking on study Bibles. I'm holding my click on my trackpad. Still holding the click, I'm dragging it, and you see that drop shadow there. I'm still holding the click. Whenever I let go, it's gonna put that category where I let go, where the drop shadow is. So if I take grammars, or that was study Bibles, so now it vaulted that to the top. Now if I wanted study Bibles at the bottom, click, hold, drag, drop, it's at the bottom. You might think about these categories. In what order do you tend to use them? My typical order, and it depends on what I'm doing, but I tend to have cross references first, study Bible second. So click, hold, drag, drop, maybe commentaries next, click, hold, drag, drop. Word list I don't use very often, that's just me. Topics I don't use very often. We'll talk through all of these and you can ask questions. Apparatus you may or may not use, my tool set grammar. So that looks about how I would use it typically. And then again, you can expand and collapse these as you're ready to work through them. But that click, hold, drag, and drop to rearrange categories may be helpful to you. It doesn't really matter because you can see all of your categories at a glance. So if my study Bibles are down here, I can get to them pretty easily. But you may as well make it usable for you, especially if you're going to be in and out of this info pane a lot. So that's how you would rearrange your categories. Let's talk about how to actually access this stuff in the info pane, which is maybe why you came here today. I'm going to open up study Bibles and commentaries. Let me just drag my commentaries up. All right, so we'll use the commentaries for an example. This holds true for other resources, but now that you've got your resources showing, now that you've adjusted your size of whether you're showing covers or not, what your text size is, how many you're showing at a time, now we're ready to access what's in the info pane. And I'm going to close my library sidebar here to maximize my screen real estate. All right, so I'm in Genesis 1:26. And I've got some stuff showing here. I've got cross references, commentaries, and more. Let's look at commentaries. And let's talk about how to read commentaries from the info pane. There are at least 4 ways to do this. And we'll go through all of them, and then you can just decide what's the most helpful, efficient way for you. The first way, and I've listed this in the handout, click to open as a parallel pane with your Bible. Let's say I'm going to read through Genesis 1 and I see here the JPS Torah commentary, excellent commentary. I'm just going to click on it and it opens it up in parallel to my Bible text and in parallel to my info pane. This is the same thing as if I had gone to add parallel, reference tools, commentaries, JPS commentary. It would do the same thing there. It just saves a lot of time. I can close it when I'm done, but that's just click and it opens as a parallel pane. Now, the advantage to this is maybe I always want the JPS Torah commentary. Maybe I say that's such an excellent commentary, which in my opinion it is, that I always want to read what they have to say. Well, in that case, just leave it there and it will follow you as you scroll through the text. And I don't need to open it and reopen it from the info pane. I can just keep that there. So that's one way. You can click to open as a parallel pane with your Bible. You could do that with the study Bible too. Maybe the NLT study Bible you always want open with you, just like you would with an actual study Bible where it's all on the same page. You could even resize it. You could even move this down and have it serve and even close your instant details. This serves, you know, kind of looks like how it looks in print. Maybe even minimize your info pane a little bit, make your font bigger, make this smaller. So that maybe looks a little bit more like an actual print study Bible. So you can do that in the info pane. That's the first way. Click to open as a parallel pane. And by the way, all this stuff, I'm just clicking this divider here and dragging it, changing font size. That's all customizable. Another way to access a commentary or a grammar or a study Bible for that matter from your info pane is to command click on Mac or control click on Windows to open up that resource in a new zone. So let's go back to Genesis 1:26. I'm going to see the same information that I would see here. In fact, let's do both at once. Here it is as a parallel pane, which I can close, and I will in a moment. But I can also hover over JPS Torah commentary and hold down command on Mac, which I am, or on Windows, hold it down, click it, and it opens it up. You'll see the content is identical. It's the same verse, it's the same thing, but it opens it up in a different way. It's in a different zone now. Accordance has tabs, panes, zones, and then workspace. Workspace is the largest unit of measurement. Think, you know, different cup sizes when you're baking. It's got different denominations of you know, units, different units that you work in. So the info pane scrolls with me, but maybe I don't want it to scroll with me. Maybe I only want the biblical text in the info pane, and that's all I want to advance together. For that, control click or command click to open your resource in another zone. Now it will still follow you as you scroll. I'm scrolling my biblical text, and at right, that tab is still following me, but it's open as a separate tab. And that's because from the info pane, it ties your scrolling so that it does like it was a parallel pane. But what's different about this is it's open in its own zone. And so unlike the parallel pane, now you have the content sidebar. So let me move this info pane down. Let me move this over. Now you can actually see more of the resource. You couldn't do this when it was open as a parallel pane, but now you've got the same content open as its own separate zone, its own separate tab. And so now you can navigate in and out of the other parts of the resources. Maybe you just want to search for creation in here in the titles. And so you could do that quickly and navigate that way. That tie that's here will keep you tied to your Bible text, but you can also remove it. So I'm going to remove this tie. And maybe I want to search it, maybe I don't, maybe I just want to leave it here. Maybe I want to say, all right, I'm just going to keep that there because this stuff on verse 26 looks really good. Let me just read ahead. But now I can scroll my Bible text and keep my place here in the commentary, maybe for later reading, by untying that tab. And then I can tie it back, and now it will follow me again. Again, it's all personal preference. How do you want to make your way in and out of these resources? Let me put this info pane back at right, resize this a bit. One way that I use this, this command click feature is I will look at a verse, maybe we do Genesis 1:27, and I'll say, all right, I'm gonna really spend some time on this. And so I will just say, all right, I want the JPS Torah commentary, I want the Torah Modern commentary, so command click. I want the background commentary, command click. Let's take Zondervan Illustrated Bible Backgrounds Commentary, Bible Speaks Today. So I might command click a bunch of these open at one time, and then I've got this tiled tab way of accessing these different commentaries. And at this point, you can even close your info pane if you've got what you need and carry out your research this way. I think of this as when you are reading a well-sourced article online and it's got hyperlinks to background or bibliography or whatever, and you start reading one article and you end up with 20 tabs open. Well, you can think of the info pane that way. It's all these hyperlinks. And so I might just say, all right, these are the 5 I want. Let me get them open as separate tabs in its own zone, and I'll do it that way. And then I keep my text a little cleaner. I've just got text and info pane, as opposed to clicking and having it go with me as a parallel pane. Now it's a tied tab or a tab that I can untie in its own zone, and it's a fully functioning tool. I can get in and out of the contents that way. One thing you could also consider is, let's just talk about one commentary at a time. Let's say I want the Torah commentary open always and everywhere, and so I will click it here to have it as a parallel, and I can command click. We saw this already, but what I might do in this case now is untie this tab and know that this same resource, see, the text is identical. This will follow me through the text verse by verse. This will not, because I untied it. So maybe I want the Torah commentary here verse by verse, but maybe I want to actually use this search entry area here and look for a word like image and see, well, it's 163 times, so that's a lot. But how does the commentary talk about the word image? Well, of course, it's going to give me Genesis 1:26. It shows here, but I can navigate down by hit and look all through the commentary, and it'll show me the verses down here, even while I'm still in my originating passage here with the parallel pane. So you might think about how you want to use it, but you've got those two options. 2 more ways to access what's in the info pane. And these are not mutually exclusive. You can do all of these all at once. Let's talk about the instant details. Got my instant details open here. I can size this. I'm going to make that a little bit larger. And what I can do now, let's go back to Genesis 1:26. So I'm seeing the same content. I can hover over the JPS Torah commentary and see it in the instant details. Now, that's not the whole comment on that verse. This is maybe a little more convenient for study Bibles because it tends to have a shorter comment. Like here, even on this highly commented on verse with lots of content for a study Bible, it all fits in that info pane. This is a great way to just see at a glance what your resources have. You can keep your workspace nice and clean and just read and see what's there. Now, you won't be able to mark this up, or I mean, you can copy and paste the whole thing, but not individual sentences. So it's more of a kind of browse quickly method. But as soon as you see something like, oh yeah, this is good, I really want to spend time with this, just command click it, and it's in a new tab. And now you can come back to it later and continue to hover over your different resources. So whether it's commentaries or study Bibles or grammars, anything that's showing in your info pane, you can hover over it and look inside. And it's not just that you're looking inside the commentary in general, you're looking inside, remember, at the context specific information. So you're looking inside the commentary as if you had opened it and run a search for Genesis 1:26, and it's taking you right to that reference. And however many commentaries you have, I mean, I'm not a developer, so maybe I'm just easily impressed, but I will never cease to be amazed at how fast this instant details is, that you can just barely move your finger and you get the entirety or close to it of an entry in your instant details, and then navigate away and your instant details are clear. You can use them for words again in the text. So that's a third way to access what's in the instant details. And I note this on the handout, I say hover over to read a snippet, because it may be a snippet, it may be the whole thing. It just depends on what fits. If you've got a smaller instant details, maybe it doesn't all fit, maybe it does, but it doesn't really matter because you can still do something like this by clicking and holding for an instant details popover. This will give you the full text no matter how long it is, because what happens here, if you click and hold or option click on a resource, notice I'm hovering over, not clicking anything, hovering, and I'm seeing the instant details, but it cuts off. But if I click and hold and let go, so I clicked and held and let go, my hands are off the trackpad now. Now I've got this pop-up window. Again, identical content as if I had hovered over it. I've got this pop-up window, but you'll notice there's a scroll bar here. And now without having to click or hold anything, I can just scroll through and read this. Can even change the font here. I can copy and paste the whole thing. I can also make this a floating window. So when I do that, I've got instant details as a floating window. This would be kind of a cumbersome way to read it, but maybe you find a good way to arrange this. Maybe you put it down here like this. And now you've got a much bigger window that's floating, and then you can close it when you're done. But if your goal is to keep your workspace nice and tidy and not actually open things or not open things yet, you can just click and hold and then scroll that. Same thing as you're doing in your instant details, only this is thorough. It gets everything because of the scroll bar, which the instant details does not have. And then you may say, all right, click, hold, read through that. That looks good. I'm going to command click that open in a new tab. Let's preview this. That looks good. Command click that open in a new tab. And before long, you've got a pretty robust workspace setup. But it all comes from the info pane. You're not even opening your library per se, at least not through this library pane. So it's meant to really save you some time to get in and out of your resources and to save the guesswork. Number one, you don't have to try to remember what commentaries you have on Genesis to look them up in the library. If you've got one, it shows. And number two, you don't have to go look it up in the commentary because it does it for you. So I titled this Reading Commentaries from the Info Pane, but as I mentioned, that will work for study Bibles, it will work for grammars, it will work for anything in the Info Pane. So go to grammars here, I can hover over this. Now that might be a little bit more cumbersome, but I can also just click this open into a new tab with the grammars. Those work a little bit differently, but I've got the full results there. Let's pause there. We're at about the halfway mark, and or maybe a little over. Let's see what questions or comments you have. We're going to get more into the weeds now on two things in particular. One is organizing the order of your commentaries and study Bibles in the info pane. That's one. And the other is cross references in the info pane. That's just one category. But I welcome any and all comments or questions you've got on any part of what we've studied so far, or if there's anything that you came here to ask about. We'll just pause for a moment and see what questions you have, and if not, we'll keep on. All right, well, let's talk about reordering what's in the info pane. Now, we reordered the categories already, and that was just the click, hold, drag, drop. So maybe I want my study Bibles first, and in fact, I often do, because by the time I'm ready to go to secondary sources, I like to start small. It can be overwhelming to get pages on pages of text. So I might like to think through, all right, once I've done my own work on the verse, maybe I would probably even have a Hebrew text open and have done some work. I might like to get just an overview of some of the comments through the study Bibles before I go to commentary. So I tend to have that first. So we talked about the categories, but how do you organize the stuff within the categories? That's a little bit more involved than organizing the categories. The categories, again, just drag them, click, hold, drag, drop. Can't do that with the books. I'm trying, it doesn't work. You have to organize those through the library. So I know I said commentaries here in the handout. I'm going to show you with study Bibles just because I've got fewer of those in my library, but it works the same way. So I've got the NLT study Bible showing here, Life Application Bible next, and the Apologetic Study Bible. Let's say I want one of these other ones to show first. Let's say I want the Jewish Study Bible showing first and something else showing second. Go to the library, and there's a whole lot here. But all you need to do, and here are these same expand collapse triangles. I just need to go to my study Bibles. And again, same for your commentaries. Everything I'm showing you here works the same way. But for my study Bibles, this is the order that I've got them listed in the library. Now, there are some ways to automate this. I can alphabetize these. So if I do that, I'm going to lose my order of priority, and there's not a way to unalphabetize it. But let's live dangerously and do it anyway. All right, I just alphabetized my study Bibles, so my own personal priority is gone. Now, they're still showing in the order that I had them before until I advance a verse. And now it picks up that setting. So what you see in the instant details is following the order of your library, which means you can customize it. So maybe you want alphabetized study Bibles, and if so, it will do that for you. And now I've got them showing here. But if that default setting does not work for you, and if you want to see certain ones first, then I really appreciate the New Living Study Bible. How would I do that? Well, I can always show more, show less, or I could make it show a whole lot and always get there. But I'm going to just take this from my library. Now, this is where it is identical to category organization. You do the same, click, hold, drag, drop. That same drop shadow, it's a little thinner, shows you where it's going. So as soon as you see the drop shadow, that's where you want it to go. Put it right there. So let's say I want to have the NLT Study Bible, the Orthodox Study Bible, so click, hold, drag, drop, and the Jewish Study Bible is my top 3. And maybe I don't really care about the other ones. Maybe they can be in whatever order they want to. I mean, you could spend the time and really organize this, but maybe that's sufficient for now. So as soon as I advance, this alphabetized organization is going to be overridden by what I just did. It's going to show me the NLT Study Bible first, the Orthodox Study Bible second, Jewish Study Bible third, and then it will continue with the alphabetized books that I've got there. And again, you can customize how much is showing here, how big it all is, but this library is the place to go. Same thing with your commentaries. You can prioritize what shows first in your commentaries. Now, commentaries is a little interesting. The commentary section is a little interesting. Typically a study Bible, not always, but typically a study Bible covers the entire corpus, Old and New Testament. The Jewish Study Bible would be an exception. You're not going to have the New Testament in that particular Bible. Commentaries, on the other hand, you'll notice here in my library, you've got things like an individual volume on just one book, or maybe you've got like this Torah commentary that covers 5 books, or an Old Testament commentary that covers just the Old Testament, or a New Bible commentary covers everything. Your library order, it will still respect it, but it will bypass anything that doesn't have information on the verse you're looking at. So I have R.T. France's excellent Mark commentary, New International Greek Testament commentary, showing first in my library. And that's because anytime I'm in Mark, I want to see that right away. So if I go to Mark 1:3, my info pane is going to show that first. Then it's going to show my New Bible commentary if it has a verse, and yes, it has a Mark 1:3 in it, but it vaulted that to the top because anytime I'm in Mark, I want to look at this commentary first. You may have something different. Here, it did not show because Mark is not Genesis. It did give me the New Bible commentary because that does have Genesis 1:27 in it. So as you're organizing your commentary order in your library, same as what I showed you with the study Bibles, click, hold, drag, and drop. But what I tend to do is I tend to take those books on, those commentaries on individual books that I really use a lot, and I'll put them up top in my commentary list. So I'll have Mark up there, I'll have Waltke, maybe Nycote, Deuteronomy, Malachi, then and now, whatever it is, I'll have that up there. And then I'll have other ones next. So notice here how I've got Mark, Psalms, New Bible Commentary. Genesis is not going to find me anything on Mark in the Psalms, but if I go to Psalm 23, if Waltke covers that, it will be there, and there it is. And that's just because I always want to see Waltke first when I'm in the Psalms. So you might spend some time with that, with your library. There's a lot that you can organize here. It's been a little while since we've offered it, but we've done a whole webinar on organizing your library. That can be tedious. My library goes through various degrees of organization depending on the season of life and my use of accordance. It has been very organized before. It's not terribly organized now. And in fact, you don't really need to organize it. You could take the time to prioritize commentaries and study Bibles, but in the end, whatever passage you're in, you can open up your info pane, and whether you see the commentary you most want to see or not, you can just click on show more until you see it. So there's WBC. Maybe I was looking for that. That just took me a click or two. And in fact, you could even, as we saw before, show 40 initial commentaries. Now, I don't know if I have 40 commentaries on Mark, but what that will do is, if I do, it will show all of them. I have to close and reopen for that. So now they're all there. It's like there's more than 40 in this case. How about that? So I can change the order or not. And this visual method works really well for me. I've used these, and this may be true for you too. I know so well what these commentaries look like. You know, you could strip the wording off the cover and I could just see the color and design and I would know what commentary it is. So I can get very quickly there. So maybe you don't need to spend any time organizing your library. That's up to you. But the times when I organize my library is if I'm in a book a lot, like I'm in Mark a lot, because as many of you know, we're doing this translation notes webinar. There will be another session Friday where I go through the Greek of Mark, and France is always my first Greek commentary I go to. So I did take 10 seconds to find that in the library and drag him up to the top so that I would see that first in my info pane. All right, let's pause there. That was all about organizing the order of your commentaries in the info pane. That's true of your commentaries. It's true of your grammars, for that matter. It's true of your study Bibles. Those will all be organized in your library. It will respect the ordering of your library. And again, maybe, I mean, the info pane gives you everything and you can get to everything from it. You really don't need to do that at all. That's just personal preference, but you may wish to do that. And you get to your library from the toolbar here. You can also open it from your window menu and organize it to whatever extent you want to. Let me know if you've got comments or questions on that, and then we'll continue in just a moment through a couple other things. Okay, interesting. Here's a good note. Someone says, if you move a commentary, I'll put this in the chat, out of the commentary section of the library, it will not appear in the info pane. Okay, good to know. So you can, I mean, you can really rearrange your library, including moving things into different categories. So that's good to know. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, let's talk about cross-references. And this is just another individual category here. But this one's a little unique in the sense that, unlike study Bibles and commentaries, where it looks up every tool you have in that category, for whatever reason, and I'm sure there's a good programming reason for this, for whatever reason, you just get one cross-reference tool at a time in the info pane. So the way to find that is where we were before, set info pane options, and it's this setting here, cross-reference tool. And whatever you've got in your library will show here. So if you've got it installed in your library, you'll see it here. And For me, this just depends on what I'm doing. So here's, like, for example, NA28, this Greek New Testament text has great cross references. That won't be super helpful if I'm studying across the whole canon of the Bible. So maybe I want New Living Translation Study Bible cross references. So click on OK, and notice that that changed. And even different cross, I mean, you might think, well, this verse is either mentioning another verse or it's not. Well, it's there are some quotations where it's pretty clear. Mark 1:3 is a great example. I mean, we're quoting scripture, and so your cross-reference tools will tell you what's being quoted here. But you may get cross-references may do this differently. So in fact, in the NLT Study Bible, you may get parallel passages, or you may get allusions, allusion. So this passage is being evoked, if not quoted, and so that gets into interpretation. So your cross references will vary from tool to tool. So you might just think about which one you most use. You can see them all at once in your library, and it's probably even worth some time. Just close everything at some point and click open a given tool and see how it's organized, see what's there, see what you think is the most useful. I use the comprehensive cross-references, which is a pretty interesting and pretty unique tool that you can find out more about, and it's on the website. But you'll see here it is a complete cross-reference index for all of this stuff. So whatever I'm in, and someone mentioned earlier, your info pane will work for Josephus. Whatever I'm in, this will probably have some cross-reference. So I use that particular tool. But that's something a little bit unique in the info pane, in that it's just one thing open at a time, and you can change that in the gear icon. We have talked about cross-references, study Bibles, commentaries. We talked a little bit about grammars. Let me just add a note here on that. Study Bibles and commentaries will open in parallel like this, so they'll scroll with you. Grammars will not. And in fact, notice NLT Study Bible, click, open as parallel pane, command click, open in separate tab, separate zone. We looked at that before. That's Study Bibles. Grammar's not so. If I command click, open in a new zone, new tab as expected. But if I just click the grammars, will it open as a parallel pane? No, it won't, because it can't, because it's not organized by chapter and verse. My study Bibles are, my cross-references are, my commentaries are, my grammars are not. They're organized by however the author organized it. However, it does have references, so it will pull them up. It just does it a little bit differently. So with your grammars from the info pane, you can command click or control click. It will respect that, but you don't have to. You can just click it, because it cannot open that as a parallel pane, because it's not a chapter and verse reference tool. If I click it open, it will search for that passage and show me how many hits I've got, and I can advance this way. Notice too, there's no tab tie. I don't think it even can it tie to the tab? I don't think that's really going to do anything there. So it works a little bit differently compared to your other categories in the info pane. So I just wanted to point that out, so that your grammars just click, click, click. You can see them all at once. And now I've got multiple tabs here, and I can make my way through what's there and close that when I'm ready. Let's talk about parallel passages. This is not in your handout, but I wanted to talk about this. You can put this up at the top too. In fact, I would do this if I were reading through the Gospels. I might put that category up at the top, because maybe I'm here with John the Baptist, John the Baptizer, and I want to see where else is that. And in my parallel passages category, what this is doing, a little bit different from the other ones. Let me open up Instant Details. It is surfacing from my library, my parallel passage tools. Bear with me as I scroll down here. Again, it's respecting the order of my library, and so New Testament epistle parallels is third, but it's not third here, but that's because I'm not in an epistle. So it's doing what I expect. Mark 1:4, gospel harmony, and then it does a couple things. So I can open up this parallel tool on its own by clicking it, and like the grammar, it will open in a separate tab on its own. It will also give me hyperlinks here. And so just like I hovered over the book covers, I can see that information there. I can either hover over it or click hold if it looks like a longer passage. Like here, this doesn't all show in my instant details, but if I click it, I get a scrollable popover window. So parallel passages is another category in your info pane. Again, if you're looking at the Gospels especially, you might want to see this. Maybe you're at a story and there's a detail that's not there that you are sure was there, and it turns out you're reading in Matthew and it was in Luke or something like that. Now, as with everything else, parallel passages, that follows you, it updates passage by passage. It is context specific for the verse, as I've said, so you may scroll a little bit and it may stay because it's organized by passage. In other words, these parallel passage tools don't map verse for verse. They map passage by passage. So I'm in Mark 1:24. That comes as part of 1:21 through 28, and here are my parallel passages that we'll show here. By the way, I didn't mention this earlier, but one kind of neat thing about your info pane is that whereas it is context specific for the verse, it will show you also the passage underneath the verse that's there. So as I'm scrolling through here, my verse will advance, but this will give me the passage heading and the larger passage as well. So it's just chock full of information. If you're coming to the info pane for the first time, this can be overwhelming. We are recording today's session if you want to go back and watch and rewatch, but there's a lot that you can do with the info pane. And those, the parallel passages I think are especially useful because you can hover just to see what's at hand there, but you can also click it open and get it open as its own separate tool. And it's in its zone and you can navigate it that way. Notice here, this is a little bit unique too. I'm seeing in the parallel passages Matthew 4:23 through 25, Mark 1:35 through 39, Luke 4:22 through 44. Well, technically speaking, Mark 1:35 through 39 is not a parallel passage to Mark 1:35 through 39. The parallel passages are just Matthew and Luke. So it's redundant, but it's doing that because it's showing you every gospel account that is included in that harmony or in those parallels. And you'll notice even here, there's some difference, and you might get a, is this a parallel or not? I mean, there's some degree of subjectivity there. But don't be confused when you see your passage that you're looking at, Mark 1:40, here in the info pane under parallel passages. It's not a parallel passage, it is the passage, but it's showing you that because it's showing you what's in that particular parallel tool. So like I said, when I'm reading the Gospels, I tend to have this up toward the top because often I'm asking the question, what do the Gospel parallels have to say about this? And you will notice in the synoptics that you'll see a lot more of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John will show up sometimes. You are less likely to see parallel passages in John. Scrolling through here, they'll be there. I mean, they're, John the Baptist, for example, but just by virtue of what kind of book John is, you'll probably have less here. But if it's there, your info pane will surface it for you. I've linked to a lot more here in the help files. Let me just show you this. If I copy the link here, I'm going to go to File, New tab, Web Browser, and I'll just put this here. There's more in this help file. Believe it or not, we didn't cover everything today. One thing we did not cover is the tool set. which is your own customized category in the info pane. So that's talked about at length in this help article. But you can do things like add dictionaries to it. You can even put your favorite commentaries in there. You can make it your top 5. But the tool set is something you may want to look into. Like, for example, how you've got the grammars here, that's looking it up by reference. Well, you could have it show dictionaries. And then dictionaries, like grammars, are not organized by chapter and verse. They're organized alphabetically, but you can put them in your tool set by adding them. In fact, I've got some in mind now, so that if you've got a particular verse showing in your dictionary, it will show up there and you can click it open and see it that way. I'll pause there, or I should say I'll stop there. And again, that help file's got a lot of great stuff there, but hopefully this has been a helpful overview for you of the info pane. And I've titled this info pane to launch your studies because you really can think of it as a launching pad. In fact, what I will often do is I will open what I want from the info pane. I'm just kind of quickly command clicking here at random, maybe get 5 or 6 resources open, and then I'll close the info pane altogether. I really maybe just want to focus on the text and the commentaries. So the info pane is there to launch you into all of your resources. It saves a lot of time, and then you can close it and open it as needed. So let's see what questions and comments you've got, especially if you have not asked a question. I'll prioritize anyone who hasn't asked questions or comments. You can just type that into the chat and we'll be happy to respond there. What questions do you have? Yeah, here's a comment I'll share. Someone says the info pane's passage heading comes from David Lang's outline of the Bible books module. So if I open up outlines of Bible books, and you can even tie this to your text so that it follows you, you'll see a match there. You can also click, this is a hyperlink. Anytime you see a magnifying glass in accordance, you can click the thing open. So you may just look for that in terms of hyperlinks. Any last questions or comments before we wrap up? I'm going to end the recording and then I'll stay on for just a moment for those of you who are here live to do one more piece of housekeeping. But again, if you're watching the recording, thanks so much for watching. You can email me at abramkj@accordancebible.com for the handout or with any other questions or comments you've got.